Hello, hello, hello. TM24 here, and we are back with some more Marvel Snap content. Now, since the patch, the balance update, whatever you want to call it, some decks are going to rise and some are going to fall, and the meta is still kind of figuring itself out. Now, while the meta's doing this, I went ahead and I've been trying a whole bunch of different things to see what is working well. And, maybe these will be meta contenders, maybe not, but I'm going to give you guys 4 decks to try while the meta is still trying to figure itself out. And this first one here is a Mr. Negative Bossed deck. Now, this one is super fun because it allows for you to have huge dumps of power on turn 6, turn 7, whatever you end up going here. So I'll run through these cards real quickly. Of course, we got Boss. That's going to help you set everything to 3. You feel really good with Boss hitting everything except for Jane, but ultimately that's not too big of a deal. Next, we got Angela. Angela's just great. You can get her down on 2 no matter what, and she's going to feel like a really, really strong play. Hit Monkey, typically he's going to be a turn 5, turn 6 play. Psylocke is in here specifically to get Mr. Negative out on 3. Next up, we've got Ironheart. When she gets hit by Mr. Negative, just feels really, really good. Mystique, there to copy Iron Man. That's going to be your big way to enable huge dumps of power. Then we've got Bishop. He's very standard in any sort of Angela, kind of like tempo deck. Bishop is just great. Feels really good when he's been hit by Mr. Negative as well, coming out as a 1-3. We got Mr. Negative, who we talked about. The deck is built around super, super fun card. And then we've got Iron Man, right? We know what Iron Man does. When he's negatized, he is a beast. And when you copy it with Mystique, you're pretty much winning that game 9 times out of 10. We've got Magic to extend the game in case you don't hit, Miss Jane here. And then I like to include Null. Now, I do Null for a couple of reasons. 1, she's got 0 power, so you will draw her with your Mr. Negative. But 2, I've been running into a lot of Galactus decks, and she seems to be the perfect tech for those games. If you can, you get Galactus, you get Iron Man down and Null, guess what? You're probably winning that game. So, real quick, the ideal play line here is going to be Bossed on 1, Psylocke on 2, on 3, Mr. Negative, Psylocke giving you that extra energy to allow him to come out. Turn 4, it's kind of depends on what you got. If you've got Bishop, you can play him. If you've got Angela, she's a really nice play as well. Turn 5, now, if you've got Magic, I say go ahead, play her. If you don't, and you have Jane, play Jane. So the idea is to draw all those negative cards with Jane, and Magic will allow you that extra turn to do it. But if you've got Jane and no Magic, slam Jane on 5, and turn 6, you're playing everything else, and chances are you're winning this game. So I think this is one of the few decks remaining where you could go from, a combined power of like 12 on turn 5 to well over 50, 60 on turn 6, turn 7, whatever it's going to end up being. Super, super fun deck, and who knows? Mr. Negative might end up being fairly competitive once this meta shakes out, but I think this is a really fun deck, so give it a shot, but let's get into the next one. All right, and here is our next deck. It's going to look very, very familiar here. This is your standard Death Wave, but we've got the inclusion of Leader in this because Leader, I feel like he's going to get some play now that he's been buffed, so I included him in here. Other than that, we've got your typical destroy package of Carnage, Killmonger, Yondu, Deathlock, Shang-Chi gets you some destroy, and then, cards we want to destroy, Bucky, the Hood, and Squirrel Girl, right? Additionally, we've got Wave, because turn 5, you're loving to get Wave down so that you can go, a free Death, She-Hulk, and in those rare cases, Leader as well. So let's just talk about this deck real quick, right? The Hood, we love to get that demon. We love to get him destroyed. He's great to have in this deck. Squirrel Girl, again, a bunch of things that you're going to use, to destroy, essentially, to help you make sure that your death is super cheap at the end of the game. Yondu, again, he's destroying something for you. He's a one-drop, really cheap to get out there. Bucky, great to get him destroyed, whether it's by Carnage or by Deathlock, because then you're getting the Winter Soldier. 2/6 with, Deathlock on there, that's 11 power in 2 cards. You feel like you've already won that lane. Carnage, we already talked about. He's going to be in there to destroy cards. And we've got a bunch of 1-drops that he can feel real nice destroying and kind of power him up. Killmonger, we talked about. He's destroying all those 1 costs, and we've got a lot of them. Wave now. Wave, you're typically going to want to play on 5 so that it limits what they can do. And really, you retain a lot of flexibility, and we'll talk about that ideal play line in a second here. So, we've also got Deathlock in here. Again, another piece of this destroy package feels really good on Bucky. Shang-Chi to take out any huge target. Typically, you're playing Shang-Chi on 4 because you want to save, that 5th turn for Wave if you've got it. Now, of course, it all depends on how the game plays out, but I like getting Shang-Chi down a little bit earlier, get those destroys for death. If not, Shang-Chi is pretty solid on turn 4 as well, turn 6 as well, depending on what you're playing in combination with him. And then we've got Leader. Now, I think Leader's going to come back a little bit. I think this is actually a huge buff for him. And with the ideal play line, you end up playing, you're playing 3 cards plus whatever Leader plays. So that can be huge. She-Hulk, she is great in these decks. And then we all know about Death. So let's talk about the ideal play line here. Now, you've got a couple routes that you can go. If you want to make sure you get your discounts and things like that down, then you're going to need to get some destroys in there. And that's going to be thanks to Squirrel Girl and Killmonger. So, ideally, Killmonger takes out a few different things. So, let's go with one of these lines here. Squirrel Girl on 1. Typically, you can come down with maybe Bucky on 2. That feels pretty good. Turn 3, you can go ahead and get Killmonger down, and that's taking out 3 squirrels, so that's 3 destroys. Your death now costs 6, right? Next up, turn 4, ideally Deathlock on top of the Hood or something like that, and Bucky, right? So you'll have 4 mana. You could safely play Deathlock and either Yondu or the Hood on top of that Bucky lane as well. And you're going to get 2 more destroys, so that's going to bring our grand total up to 5. So Death now costs 4. So when you wave on turn 5, she's going to be free. Now, the Dream Hand here, right? Dream Hand, turn 5, you're playing Wave, and in your hand, or maybe you draw it on turn 6, you have Leader, She-Hulk, and Death. So by playing just Wave on 5, you're floating 2 energy, which means She-Hulk is now only going to cost 2. Because of Wave coming down, she's 4. Then you float 2, she becomes 2. Your Death is going to be free because of everything you've discounted. And then when you've got Leader in hand, he's going to copy whatever they play as well. So you're playing 4 cards potentially on turn 6. And they're playing 1, maybe 2. It's huge. This deck, again, super fun. It's basically just a Death Wave deck. But we toss Leader in there, and all of a sudden it feels really strong. Super fun. Definitely some wild outcomes, but this is one that I think might end up being competitive. I don't know if this is going to be the final list, but hey, it's a really fun deck. So give this Destroy Leader deck a shot. But let's get into the next deck right now. All right, it's time for some discard. Now, I think discard was a little bit tough, right? It's a little bit more gradual gameplay, but I think this deck does a really nice job of, getting some pressure out there while still having that huge upside of, discarding Apocalypse a few times and, having coming down on that Dracula. It just feels really nice. So we'll run over these cards again. We've got a couple of 1-drops. Sunspot, great to get down. You can allow him to just kind of grow because sometimes you won't have a really clean play. So Sunspot's awesome. Iceman, oh, that is Morbius, but first up is Iceman. He's going to mess with your opponent's hand a little bit. 2 power, so nothing crazy, but definitely feels nice getting down. Now, Morbius can definitely be a star here depending on what you're able to discard. And you've got, you know, a couple of cards here that will help power him up. So Morbius, of course, if you can get him down, great. Wolverine and Swarm, both really, really nice cards. Ideally, though, you're not playing them. They're being played for you. And kind of what I mean by that is they're going to be free plays, right? Ideally, turn 5, you're going to play MODOK, which means Wolverine will come down and Swarm is going to be 0, so he'll be free on turn 6. But that's the idea for those two. I typically don't like to play them unless I know they're going to come out for free. So if you've got Colleen Wing in hand, which, you know, she's kind of the next card here since we're grouping these two together, and you can safely discard, you know, either Wolverine or discard Swarm to get a couple more zeros, then yeah, feel free to drop Colleen Wing down and get those discarded. But ideally, I'm holding those until later in the game. Now, the next up is a kind of a little bit different inclusion, and it's Storm. And I think she fits great in this deck. And the reason she does is because you've got a really, really nice follow-up to her that is probably going to be stronger than whatever your opponent's doing. And if you know you've got Storm in hand, then you can storm a lane that you've already, you know, dropped some power onto. So whether you're storming a lane that has Morbius or storming a lane that has Sunspot, you can always follow up with Dracula, and all of a sudden, it feels like you've won that lane. So I think Storm is a really, really nice inclusion in this deck. Lady Sif, another discard piece, hitting your Apocalypse, allowing that Morbius to get buffed a little bit more. We all know about Dracula. I love Dracula. I typically don't play him in these types of decks too often, but in this one, he really can shine. Depending on how many times Apocalypse is discarded, Dracula can be a really, really, really strong card. We've got MODOK to discard your hand. Like we said, we'd love to hit Wolverine, Swarm. Obviously, we want to hit Apocalypse. And, you know, MODOK is great in that regard. Plus 8 power feels really, really good. And then we've got Apocalypse, who obviously we're trying to discard multiple times throughout this game. You know, ideally he's hit by Lady Sif and MODOK at a minimum. That's going to add 8 power to him. And then if Dracula's out there, it's adding another 4 on top of that. So Apocalypse, awesome. Chavez is in there for a little bit more consistent draw, and it allows you the option of either playing your Apocalypse on 6 or playing your Chavez, depending on how much power your Dracula will need. So let's talk about the ideal play line here, right? So getting Sunspot down feels really, really good. But if you're talking about your most ideal play line, I'm going to say Iceman's up first, because you're not going to get a ton of value out of Sunspot. So if you can get Iceman down, obviously you want to go Morbius on 2. Now, when you do that, you want to have some good follow-up. So I prefer to go Storm on 3, and ideally you've played all 3 of those cards in the same lane. It's going to be really hard for them to compete with Morbius, especially because in this ideal playline, you are getting MODOK down. So, Iceman, Morbius, Storm. 4, of course, we've only got one 4-drop, and that's going to be Dracula. We'd love to get him down in his own lane, and then MODOK on its own lane as well. Ideally, when you play MODOK, Wolverine has popped out for you. Maybe you've got a couple of zero-cost Swarms, but overall, you're going to be able to pump out a ton of power with this deck. And then turn 6, if Dracula needs more power, you play Chavez. If Dracula is already going to win his lane with just Chavez, you can play Apocalypse. So you've got options here. Again, discard, I felt like was a little bit, you know, with Shuri kind of running rampant and the way Lockjaw was able to just pump out huge amounts of power in one turn, discard really, really felt slow. I think now it's going to be at a pace that really suits discard, so this might end up being a deck that you see a little bit more than you thought you would, and it's a good, strong deck. So definitely give this one a shot. But I do have one more for you guys, and let's get to that one right now. All right, we've made it to our final deck here, and it's a Thanos deck. I feel like Thanos, he's kind of in a tough spot since Lockjaw went down, and since Quinjet, that nerf as well. But I really, really like this list because of what it includes and because of some of the stones. Thanos is always going to be pretty strong, but I think this one probably does the best job right now of using what Thanos has, right? So let's take a look at what we've got here. First up, we've got Ant-Man. Ant-Man's going to be great. Coming down on 6, coming down early. Either way, Ant-Man's going to be awesome. Obviously, you want to make sure you fill whatever lane Ant-Man is going to be in so that you get the most out of him. Then we've got Luke Cage. Kind of a tech card, but really not. A lot of those stones are kind of weak on their own, and if you have any location that's got negative power, or you're playing an opponent that, maybe a Spider-Woman's coming out or a Hazmat, Luke Cage feels really, really good. Mojo is another card that I kind of contemplated on keeping him in this or taking him out. I love that he's essentially a 2/8 if you can get his ongoing to go off, but it's tough to do that if you play him early. And that's kind of the problem, is that if you play him too early, your opponent's not going to fill that lane, because 2/8 is super, super efficient, and it would be really tough for them to overcome. So a little bit tough there, but if you are able to play him late, he feels really, really nice. Next up, we've got another ongoing in Armor. Armor's awesome and can feel really, really good, guarding your Devil Dino. That's your main target that you want to hit. If you can get a buffed Thanos, great. But Armor, really good protector for your Devil Dino. Next up, Lizard, another ongoing card. Just applies pressure by itself. It forces your opponent to kind of go after that lane. Otherwise, 2/5 puts you way ahead. So love Lizard in this list. Then we've got Cosmo, another protector for your Devil Dino, and can potentially block, Wong's coming out. Maybe it's going to be a Galactus. Ideally, you are going to be ahead because you've got all those stones to play. You've got plenty of early drops. So being able to get your Cosmo down before they can make their big play is going to be huge. Next up, we've got a couple of cards that are here to buff all your other cards. Kazar, you've got tons of 1-drops thanks to all the stones here, and thanks to Ant-Man. So Kazar feels really, really nice in this deck, as does Blue Marvel, just because he is going to buff everything. So 2 really great inclusions. Now, if your hand ends up being stuffed up a little bit, that's okay, because you've got a Devil Dinosaur for a big power dump on his own. Now, we get to Valkyrie. I have been a huge fan of Valkyrie since I was able to get her, and having all those low power stones, being able to drop her on top of those, negating some of the power of your opponent and buffing your own stones feels amazing. So I think she is a huge inclusion in this deck. Lastly, well, almost lastly, we know about Thanos. We know what he brings to the game, but the last big inclusion is going to be Spectrum. Almost all these cards, if you look at them, are going to be ongoing. So having the option to go Spectrum on 6 and hit some of these cards feels really, really good. So I think she is a great inclusion in this deck. Even if you don't end up playing her, it's nice to have that option. And maybe it's a lane the other opponent can't play in and they think they've already won, but you're able to get Spectrum down. And that just feels awesome. And then we've got Thanos, right? The stones are going to be the big get. Obviously, if you can play them all, Thanos is going to be huge. But we do have a couple of ongoing stones here. We've got the Soul Stone and we've got the Power Stone, which are both going to be ongoing. So again, more benefit for Spectrum. So overall, I think this is probably going to be one of the better Thanos decks right now, and definitely one that I'm going to give a good shot here over the next couple of days. I've already had pretty good results with the games that I've played, but I want to do a little bit more testing before I come out with a, kind of like a meta report once this meta settles down. So these have been 4 decks that I'm giving a shot right now, and I think you should too. If you have stuck around this long, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. If you haven't already subscribed, I would ask that you do, and hit that like button for me, as it really does help out. But until the next time, remember, have some fun.